guys? This is the fourth episode of the SportsTalkeyes show. It's been a month since our last show because us three just recently started college back up, and it just a wild schedule. Couldn't make it work with classes and everything. We are all juniors, and Keegan's a senior at the University of Iowa. That's why this show is called the SportsTalkeyes. Today, the topic is obviously college football. With tomorrow is week one kicks off. We had a couple games last night, nothing too crazy, so we're gonna get started. ESPN released their top 25, so we're going to be talking about the ESPN NCAA Top 25 first. I'm sure y'all know the preseason rankings of AP Top 25. We got I'm just going to name off the first 10. We got Clemson number 1, 2 Bama, 3 Georgia, 4 Oklahoma, 5 Ohio State, 6 LSU, 7 Michigan, 8 Florida, 9 Notre Dame, 10 Texas Longhorns. I'll just go through it all. 11 Oregon, 12 A&M, 13 Washington, 14 Utah, 15 Penn State, 16 Auburn, 17 UCF, 18 Michigan State, 19 Wisconsin, 20 the Iowa Hawkeyes, 21 Iowa State, 22 Syracuse, 23 Washington State, 24 Nebraska, and 25 Stanford. So, guys, as I just read off, who were you most surprised with being in the top 25? Tanner?
For me, it's Nebraska. There's no secret about the hype of this team coming into the season. The new head coach, Scott Frost, did really well in Central Florida, former Nebraska player, great recruiter. But when it comes down to it, they just were not good last year. And they finished out 4-8, 3-6 within the conference, including the worst team in the Big Ten last year. Definitely in the Big Ten West was Illinois. Yeah. Well, the Big Ten, worse than the Big Ten West was Illinois, and Nebraska beat them by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Which it's hard to be critical of a win, but when you're Nebraska and the whole state rallies around you, sold out incredible amount of games in a row. That's not the type of product they're looking for, and they were just, the bottom line is they were not good. 4-8, and I know they have the young quarterback that everyone is really wants him to see, really wants him to see it, really want to see him play a full year.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say. But I'm very surprised that they're in the top 25. I'm not quite sure where the hype is coming from, and it's going to be interesting to see. Keegan?
So that was my pick. But for sake of creating an argument, because I think that a lot of media pushback from Nebraska has been made evident if you look at mainstream media. You're either people who believe that they should be in the top 25, and you are strongly in that category. And there's no middle ground. There's people who heavily think they should be in, and people, as Tanner was talking about, who thinks that they shouldn't be in. And I definitely agree as to why they shouldn't be in. However, I'm going to argue that there's another team that should also be thrown in that situation. That would be Syracuse at 22. They did have 10 wins last year, which that's a much more successful season than Nebraska did. However, when you think about Syracuse and when you think about what makes their school run, football is not going to be the first thing that comes to mind. The reason why Nebraska makes it into the top 25 is that the media loves to pick a darling. In the past, that's been Texas. Texas is a team that, coming into last year, was one of those teams that I thought that they had the potential, the upside to go forward and be a top 25 team, but it's just too soon to put them up there. And that's Nebraska right now. Texas has shown that they can actually do things now. But in the past, they were put up in the top 25 and immediately dropped out. Nebraska could do that. I think they will, personally. but I also see a scenario where they do well and maintain their ranking. But Syracuse, to me, it's a similar thing as Nebraska, but kind of flipped. I think Nebraska will rise to become a good top 25 team, but Syracuse over time, I mean, they had a breakout season last year, but all of the things that they're going to have to have go their way, like they had a really high turnover margin, I believe. I wish I had that ready here to go. But they're undefeated at home, which is unlikely to happen again. And they were doing really well on the road, where they're over 500. And repeating things like that when you're not yet an established program, I don't see Syracuse staying ranked throughout the entire season. But I could be wrong.
I mean, I definitely get that pick. Syracuse, they had a great season last year, an unexpected season. They lost their quarterback. Raised some question marks. But I'm just kidding. I don't think they should be in the top 25 because
They're
basketball school.
Yeah, that's a weird argument to make. I mean, if I remember correctly, they competed very well in their conference. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they competed well against Clemson.
I think they had a spotlight game against Clemson.
Yeah,
I'm sure in the realm of what's competing against Clemson.
So I'm not arguing that they shouldn't be ranked because they're a basketball school. I'm arguing that this previous football season was a fluke. If you look back to 2017, they were 4-8. Then they jump up to 10-3. And the thing is that the reason why they're known as a basketball school is because their football team has not been good. And if you look back to just a year before, they were 4-8 and a long stretch away from being bowl eligible. I think that 2018 was a bit of a fluke. If you look at the end of the season where they played a team like Notre Dame, who went to the final the college football playoffs. Some people didn't think that they were actually there, actually belonged there, and just had the right schedule to work it out. But they got thrashed 36-3.
One thing I will say about that game, though, is their quarterback did get hurt in the second drive in that game. That's the one thing I will say. I do get your point. But, yeah, Eric Jones did go down in that game. I remember watching it. But, yeah.
For my surprise, I'm going to have to go with UCF at number 17. They lost their head coach, Scott Frost. So that's a big reason. I think, yes, they still have Scott Frost, as Tanner mentioned, they still have Scott Frost as recruits. So that's why I think they're still in the top 25. But we'll see how this new coach does, and we'll see how that pans out over the years. I still don't think they're the 17th best team in the country. Now moving on, when I was saying the names, who do you think is the most overrated team right now?
I think I don't have to go with Ohio State.
Ohio State.
I think that they're overranked because, with one of the biggest things that's occurring right now in the Ohio State program is the fact that they're going to have a change of head coach. They're going to have a change of program, most likely when you go from Urban Meyer to, and I should have had this up and ready to go, but who was the replacement coach for Urban Meyer?
Their offensive coordinator.
Their offensive coordinator, Step Ford. Okay, cool. But when you lose a guy like Urban Meyer, who's had a lot of success, whether at Florida or recently at Ohio State, typically speaking, whenever he has left a program, which granted, small sample size, but leaving Florida, they kind of went down in the trenches for a few years after. It also coincided with a guy like Tim Tebow, who also left the program at the same time. But I wish I could put this into more correct terms, but I just don't think the Ohio State's going to put together the right stuff this year with the change at the head. I know that their offensive coordinator is moving up, so they are staying face to some degree, but ultimately some guys aren't made out to be a head coach especially in the NCAA level. Ohio State thinks so, but we're just going to have to find out.
Yeah, not to mention they do have a unproven quarterback. He was the number one quarterback at Georgia, Justin Fields, or number one recruit. He committed to Georgia, saw Jake Fromm staying there, and transferred to Ohio State, and as Tate Martell also left, that's when Justin Field, it was a whole debacle.
Just to throw out my rebuttal against the Ohio State, it's kind of what you guys said. Part of it is that Ryan Day is the head coach. I don't know if he said that, but he was the offensive coordinator, and he was at Ohio State. He had bounced around different positions within Ohio State, quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator. He's been there, and he's kind of seen the culture that Urban Meyer liked to run in Ohio State.
Yeah.
And also with Justin Fields, like you lose Dwayne Haskins, you think losing a quarterback like that would have drastic effects, but in comes the number one recruit, like you said a year ago, and this dude is the real deal. He can run, he can pass. He showed exactly why he was the number one recruit. And in a conference like the Big Ten, they could see some early losses. Like, it's definitely possible. But for my team, I'm sticking in the Big Ten, and I'm going to say Penn State. Obviously, a couple years ago, they had that miracle season with, or not miracle, but they had that incredible season with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley heading their offense, and they were running over people. It fell off a little bit at the end of that year. But then last year, still having an established quarterback in Trace McSorley, they go 9-4, which isn't bad. It isn't bad. It is also not something not a record that Penn State would like to see, given where they've been recently. And now you lose Trace McSorley. You have to throw in another guy, an untested guy, as we mentioned how troublesome that could be. In a Big Ten East, no less, with a Michigan looking to make a statement, with an Ohio State, as we mentioned, with this new younger quarterback, and you still got and then over in the West, you might have to play a Wisconsin or an Iowa, or a team that on the West that can really play. So given all of the circumstances, I'm looking to see Penn State maybe start falling a little bit, because I don't think they're as good as 15 in the nation.
I think this year we're going to see how good of a coach James Franklin is, because he doesn't have that go-to guy. He had Trace McSorley, who was established quarterback last year. He had one of the best running backs I have personally seen. It's incredible what he did at his time at Penn State. It'll definitely be interesting. For my overrated team, I'm going to say Florida. Yes, they already played, so I got to see a look at that team. But just watching that game, they were playing unranked Miami, and they had to fight and claw to win that game. Horrible defensive skills. No, I can't tell you how many missed tackles I saw. Just very sloppy for the number 8 team in the nation. They won by what? A touchdown?
It was one possession game.
It was a one possession game against a unranked Miami. That's a team I'm definitely interested to see how they come back from a sloppy start. That being said, y'all have any teams we should watch out for in the top 25 that could make an impact on the college football playoffs and maybe sneak in, make some upsets?
Yeah, so I have one. Maybe you can consider them a sleeper, maybe not. They are top 10, but they're not really that much in the talks of the playoff. Yeah. And for me, it's Texas, because they had it's the season last year, as the story goes, every single year it seems it's Texas back, and year after year they are not. Yeah. Last year they took that step forward. Yeah. They beat Oklahoma earlier in the year. They lost them in the Big 12 championship game, but then they go and they play. I can't remember who they played in the bowl game. They played a tough point in the bowl game. I can't remember who it was, and they won. And I remember, I believe Sam Ehlinger was their quarterback. Yeah. After that bowl game, he's holding up the trophy, and they asked if he wanted to say anything. He said, "Texas is back." Yeah. And for the first time, I actually believed it.
Speaking of Sam Ehlinger, I actually have the stats right here. So he completed 64.3% of his passes for 3,127 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He also had 418 yards and 13 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, and as you heard those stats, and we just got confirmation they did beat Georgia in that bowl game. The argument can be made that they had their eyes on the playoff, and they were disappointed that, bottom line is they beat
Georgia.
They beat the number 3 team in the nation in a bowl game. And I even have an uncle that lives down in Austin, and talking to him, he's, at first program as storied as Texas. He's saying, the city itself is just so excited for Texas football to be back. Like we said, the first time I actually believe they're back. So I'm looking at Texas also playing in the Big 12.
Yeah,
which helps. Where Oklahoma helps. Really, Oklahoma is really the only team that is standing in their way. Keegan?
I was hoping you'd have one already because Tanner's second time in a row is already.
So I'm looking at number 11, the Oregon Ducks. They have a proven quarterback, Justin Herbert. For his last year, he completed 59.6% of his passes, 2,985 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. With that being said, I think he's going to have just a tremendous year, playing in a pretty weak Pac-12 this year. I'm expecting Oregon to do. I could honestly see them sneaking in to the college football playoffs, but if they don't, they'll be in a big-time bowl game, New Year's Six bowl game. I just really am high on this Justin Herbert for the quarterback of the Oregon Ducks, so I think they could make a run for the money.
Yeah, it's really clear. It's one of those things where you feel like if the Pac-12 has a chance for the playoff, it's going to be Oregon or Washington.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And Oregon's kind of got the quarterback education. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so while I'm trying to fly around to try and find a backup for the second time in a row, I don't want to throw out another really weak argument like I had to for Syracuse, because at the end of the day, I don't want to rehash everything that's been said. Absolutely. And the thing is that I really like Texas, for all the reasons that you stated. Texas, it's really interesting what they'll be able to do if they can put the right things together and not lose to Iowa State again. But I think I'm going to stay in state for another team that can do some damage. And that's going to be Texas A&M. And, just while I'm trying to, look around and see what all Texas A&M has, the very first thing that pops up that will really show what they will be able to do or can do is their schedule. Because they quite possibly could have the hardest schedule in all of college football this year. They already played. They beat Texas State 41-7. But soon they'll be traveling to Clemson for their second game. Then later they'll have to go through the SEC and play Auburn, Alabama. Then at the end of the season you have a back-to-back of at Georgia and at LSU to end the season.
And they play Arkansas though.
They play Arkansas. Gotta remember that. But of the 6 ranked teams that they play this year, 5 of them are in the top 10.
And 5 of them will probably remain in the top 10 as well.
Yeah, because I don't see Georgia, LSU, Alabama, Clemson.
I don't see them being lower than 8. Bama, Clemson, and Georgia, I don't think will drop very far this year.
No. But just off of schedule alone, if they can put some wins together, because pretty much anything can happen in terms of playoff ramifications when you play that many ranked teams.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So, of the top 15, do you think there will be any team unranked by the end of the year?
I think it's kind of funny. I'm gonna roll right off of that last argument and say that that's the same reason they could be unranked at the end of the year. Yeah. Just because I could totally see them in a situation being in the playoffs with that schedule. Yeah. And on the other hand, if they drop 4 or 5 games, and if they say they drop 3, they play 6 ranked teams. Say they beat 3 of them and lose to the other 3. and then you drop a game here or there that you should win. That's 5 losses already. And I don't see a 7-5 team being ranked.
Yeah.
I would see an 8-4 one when they're already starting at 12 that high.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
for the same reason they could make the playoffs, they could miss out on being ranked altogether.
See, isn't it great to return the favor? Besides what I already said before about my hesitancy towards Penn State, I do think that they have a good chance of falling out if things don't work. And even before you said Texas A&M could possibly make a run, I had my mind on them to possibly fall out. So I completely agree. The schedule is just so daunting, top to bottom. You lose some of those games, even if they're close games. You start to get frustrated. You start to lose games you should win, and then everything spirals out of control. So other than Penn State and Texas A&M, I really don't see any other top 15 team falling out.
The only one that could possibly, just based on what I watched last night, is Utah. I mean, they pretty easily beat BYU, but they played super sloppy as well. Might just be first game jitters, but if, like we said, A&M and Penn State, just to throw another one in there, I'm going to say Utah. So now that we are the Sports Talkeyes, we are huge fans of the Iowa Hawkeyes sports. What are your expectations for Iowa? We have a decent schedule. We should win a couple games. We should have an average Iowa season. We start out tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. against Miami of Ohio, then Rutgers at home, then at Iowa State, then Middle Tennessee State, then at Michigan, Penn State at home, Purdue at home, at Northwestern, at Wisconsin, then Minnesota, Illinois at home, and then we end the year at Lincoln against Nebraska. So what are your record predictions for this Iowa football team this year?
So normally with an Iowa team, if you want to go with a safe bet, you guess 8 wins. That's exactly what happens year in, year out. Because, somewhere around those lines, they do well at the beginning of the season, and then they drop some games that you thought they would have won, and then you find yourself in that 7 to 9 win range. This year, I'm going to take a step outside of that range, and I think that Iowa gets to double digits and goes 10-2.
So who do you think the 2 losses are?
I think the 2 losses, I think they'll split Michigan and Penn State, and then they'll either drop one, then they'll drop another to a rival. I'm not sure whether it'll be Wisconsin, Nebraska, or maybe even Iowa State early in the season up in Ames. That's still a tough team, and they just keep moving forward. If you look at the past, they've done a great job with the new coaching regime up in Ames. They've always been the sneaky good team in the Big 12, but they're not sneaky anymore. Yeah. They've kept knocking good teams off year in, year out. Granted, Iowa has beaten Iowa State, I believe, 4 of the last 4 times they've played each other. But I think that my biggest reason for this, with my prediction of 10 wins, the core concept of my prediction comes to the idea that Nate Stanley takes this step forward. Because with quarterback play, with the wideouts that we have, with the offensive line being as stable as it pretty much always is, the defense, they lost a few key pieces, but they're returning a guy who didn't even start last year in AJ Espinosa, who's probably going to lead the Big Ten in sacks, or is at least going to be up there. But the thing is with a third-year quarterback, that's a lot more experience than anybody else has at that position. So if he's able to take the skills that he appears to have, being a tall, strong quarterback, and can put his experience together to have a strong senior season, I don't know why Iowa can't represent the Big Ten in the Big Ten West in the championship.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna play the odds and land in that 7 to 9 range. I actually have 9-3. The 3 losses I have are at Michigan, at Wisconsin, and at Nebraska. we've talked about how we don't get the Nebraska hype, but by the end of the year, and however many straight sold out games Nebraska has, and we're just not as good on the road as we are at home. That place is going to be rocking. They finally think they have a chance to beat us for the first time in many years. So I do think that they're going to play a little bit inspired and come out on top. But those 3 games on the road, the other ones, which if my prediction is true, that would be a 7-0 at home, which I think is very possible looking at the opponents.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the 9-3 is my prediction. Headed to a pretty similar bowl game, like a Outback Bowl type area.
Yeah.
That seems to be where we are. And you could just say I'm boring, but I just like to play the odds.
Yeah. I'm gonna go 8-4. Pretty typical Iowa end of the year record. My 4 losses: Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, and then I'm split in between Purdue and Northwestern. Purdue, we've had trouble with them in the past, and I think they are on the up and up. They do have a great running back from what I hear. And then if we do beat Purdue, I think it'll be Northwestern, just because we always play as. So if we're the obvious better team, we always play to their level. We always struggle in Northwestern, no matter how good we are, no matter how bad they are. So I think typical Iowa fashion, where you're going to lose to some teams we shouldn't lose to, but we'll see. I'm excited for Saturday night. Hopefully it's an easy win, but I expect some sloppy play first half, but I'm sure we'll get our crap together second half and come out with an easy dub. That being said, who do y'all think needs to improve this year? Whether that be the passing game, defensive backs. Terry, you want to take this one?
What needs to improve as a whole, I think, is the passing. We talked, Keegan talked about it. I know you have written here. It's all on Nate Stanley. Yeah. 3-year quarterback, as you said, more experience than really anyone in the Big Ten. Showed us a lot year 1. Seemed to take a little bit of a step back year 2, and year 3 is where we're looking for a huge stride. Losing his 2 tight ends, that'll hurt. Amir Smith-Marset, that's his name. Amir Smith-Marset, the playmaker that he is, looking for him to step up even more. And one guy who doesn't necessarily need to step up, he just needs to continue what he's doing now in black and gold instead of maize and blue, and that is Oliver Martin. I'm looking for him to have a great year. I think that's a move that has really gone under the radar. Getting athletic, good receivers for quarterback who kind of lost his 2 big tight end targets. But as a whole, you know what the Iowa offensive line is, producing NFL talent every year. You know what the running backs are. They're going to hit the holes when they're there. So really the big question mark is the passing game. Yeah. And from top to bottom, quarterbacks to tight ends to wide receivers, they just need to be better.
I definitely understand the comment with what the passing game being the main thing that needs to step forward. But I'm actually going to answer with the running game, because I think that last year if you look back to the history of Iowa running backs, pretty much all the way since Sean Green, there has always been 1 and sometimes even 2 guys. And what we're hoping to see again is 3 guys be able to step forward and be that guy. Because last year it was very much running back by committee, but there was never one moment throughout the season where the coaching staff said, nope, that's our number 1 running back. Nope, that's our guy. Because at the very beginning of the season, it seemed to potentially be Ivory Kelly-Martin, I believe, was who was getting a lot of the very first touches of the year. But at the end of the year, they started to go more towards Mekhi Sargent, who's a younger back for Iowa. Out of Madison, Wisconsin, ironically enough, I looked at Mekhi Sargent to be able to carry more of the load like he was able to do last year, because there were moments throughout the year where I felt like the running backs really weren't able to break those holes like we have had in the past. And moving forward, if I was able to establish a strong running game like we've been missing. I don't believe that we've had as strong of a running game last year as we've had in the past. I believe Tanner's probably looking at the stats to either back me up or rebuttal. Oh, he's not? Okay. But the deal is if you're able to establish the running game, it opens up the passing game. They work in tandem, and really, if you're a balanced offense, I mean, it's in the name. You can't be balanced if you're relying on one more than the other. And for Iowa to have a successful season, they're going to need to go with both. I would think Stanley will take a step forward, but I'm a little less certain about the running game.
I think the important takeaway here is whether you think it's the passing or you think it's the running, it's the offense.
Yeah.
The history of Iowa, or even not the history, but in recent memory of Iowa, it's just been they've gone as far as the offense has taken.
Uh-huh.
The defense has always shown up no matter where. It's been as far as the offense, offense can take them.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with y'all. Nate Stanley needs to take a step forward, but more specifically, I really like Nate Stanley's short game. I think he's pretty consistent. The biggest flaw in his game, for me, is his consistency with deep ball. It'll either be right on the money, 5 yards short, or 10 yards long. And if he can get that, I think our passing game will improve. And also, like Keegan said, running backs. We don't have that one guy. Torrin Young, he averaged 4.7 yards, 136 attempts, and 5 touchdowns. Ivory Kelly Martin, 3.5 yards on 97 attempts, 2 touchdowns. Mekhi Sargent, 4.7 yards on 159 attempts, 9 touchdowns. We don't have that one guy. I expect, like Keegan said, Mekhi Sargent, JUCO transfer. We just need that balance, like Keegan said. We had 16 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns last year, and 26 passing touchdowns. With the improvement of the running backs, I think that'll make Stanley be even more consistent because he's not throwing the ball 35 times a game. So yeah, running backs and the offense, like we said. So we kind of mentioned this, but I just want to confirm. Who do you think we need to be on the lookout for this year?
I think I'm going to answer the question a little differently than I think these guys will. A guy to have your eyes on is going to be the guy who you will have your attention on every single snap when he's on the field. Is you'll be looking at AJ Espinosa because I think that he has I think he's possibly the most talented defensive player we've had on the line since Adrian Claiborne.
Absolutely.
And with the length of NFL career that Claiborne has had, as in he's still active, on an active NFL roster, I think that AJ Espinosa will take your eyes and be able to really show what he's able to do. Unfortunately, because I think he'll do so well, I don't think he'll stay for his senior season. He's just that talented of a prospect for the NFL. But when I was on defense, the first thing you're going to look at is AJ going to be able to break through the defensive line immediately? Yeah. And if not, then you'll drop back to the secondary a little bit. But as soon as the ball snaps, you're looking at the defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair.
I mean, the bottom line is AJ Espinosa is our best player. And, you kind of open it up by saying you're going to answer it differently. I was thinking that exact same thing. AJ Espinosa is our best player. But going off of that, kind of to take it a different route, I'm going to look at Michael Ojemudia. One of our corners. I believe this is going to be his third year. So he's definitely our most experienced corner. And if you look at it the past couple years, we lost Josh Jackson, who was far and away our best shutdown corner, and interception machine. This past year we lost Monty Hooker.
Yeah,
I think he was a safety, but still a secondary piece that's always seemed to be in the play, always seemed to be batting balls down, getting tackles.
Both NFL talents now.
And now we're kind of in that weird area where there's no one to replace him.
Defended.
And the defensive line has always been it's just retool, no matter who goes to the NFL. But the secondary has had its problems. Last year, I think something that comes to mind is the Purdue game. Purdue seemed to perfectly execute the air raid offense against our, kind of untested secondary at that point. But with so many new faces and so many untested faces, I think someone like Michael Ojemudia, who has 3 years of experience under his belt, really needs to kind of take control of the secondary and be a leader and show them how it's done. Really.
Ojemudia is a senior this year.
Senior.
Yeah, so he has had 3 years of experience.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to go a completely opposite. I'm going to pick a guy we haven't seen at all, and that is Nate Whitting.
Oh, yeah.
He is a 5th-year redshirt senior. He is on the Mackey Award watch list, believe it or not, even though he only has 3 career receptions for a grand total of 68 yards and no touchdowns. I think
That's unchanged.
like Iowa's always been a pro-style football. We like dumping it off, short passes to our tight ends. We've had great tight ends in the past. George Kittle, T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant. Go even back further, Dallas Clark. We've always had great tight ends. So I think he could play a really big role in our offense. And I expect he will, just because we have been so good at tight end for so long. So I think that's a dude I'm excited to see how he does, because he hasn't played, but it's Iowa football. They love their tight ends. We kind of need him to step up, be like Noah Fant, be like T.J. Hawkinson. So I think that's another guy we need to look out for. So we already mentioned bowl game predictions. Keegan, did you mention?
I don't think I mentioned the bowl game itself. With 10 wins, Iowa would likely be representing the Big Ten West. And under that situation, I'll go ahead and just make known my Big Ten title game predictions as well. I think it's going to be Michigan and Iowa in the Big Ten title game, with Michigan advancing on to the college football playoffs after winning the Big Ten title, in which will send Iowa. The Rose Bowl, is that in the? It's not. So since the Rose Bowl isn't in the playoff rotation this year, I will be representing the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl.
Yikes!
That's
bring back good memories.
Anybody
but Stanford, please.
Now anybody but Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Before I kind of mention the Outback Bowl area, we play there quite a bit, but just for the sake of being different, because we play there so often, I'm going to say the Citrus Bowl. I believe last year's Citrus Bowl was actually Penn State, Kentucky, I believe.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Who were both top 20 teams at the time. If we finished 9-3, losing on 3 road games, I do believe we should be in the top 20, and the Citrus Bowl is pretty good place for us.
So with the prediction of 8-4, I mean, I could go the traditional route, the Outback Bowl, because we're in it every year, it seems like. I'm going to be different. I'm going to say Music City Bowl, because as a fan, Nashville is pretty fun, so I'm going to go with the Music City Bowl. You kind of mentioned it, Keegan, so do y'all have any other statements on what we should expect from the Iowa Hawkeyes this year?
With returning quarterback Nate Stanley is, in combination with having a senior quarterback, when you've also lost 3 of your best receiving players from last year with the 2 tight ends and Nick Easley leaving the team. There's going to be some holes that need to be filled out with the wideouts. I think we have a good young group of wideouts that will be able to step up, as well as a older, not really experienced in age, not experienced in snaps, anyways. But with our tight end, with the 3-headed attack of Torrin Young,
Kelly Martin,
I think the offense will be able to take a step forward. The defense does what it does, and I think Iowa will kind of return to some magic that we saw in 2015. if there isn't an injury.
Yeah, I guess my main takeaway is really kind of like you said, the three main targets leave, and I just think that's why the transfer of Oliver Martin is going to be so big this year. A four-star recruit out of high school, out of right here in Iowa City. He knows what the Hawkeyes mean to the city. He knows what a Saturday feels like, and I'm sure, as someone who went to Michigan for a couple years, I'm sure he's incredibly excited to play for his hometown team. And we're definitely excited to have him and looking for him to make big noise and help share up the holes, as you mentioned, which can be the big question mark is always their offense. It always is.
Yeah, like y'all said, I think we need to find like a Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, a guy. Nate Stanley can always rely on making a big play. Now switching to a more national scale because Keaton, I believe you have to go pretty soon.
Pretty soon.
What are your Final Four teams for college football playoffs? And who do you think is going to be in the national championship? And who's coming out on top?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and go first because we'll probably be leaving here pretty soon. But in order, I'm gonna have Clemson at number 1, Alabama at number 2. That's a bit of chalk. At 3, we're gonna have Michigan, and rounding out the top 4 will be Texas. I got Clemson orange over Texas orange, and then we're gonna have a rematch. It's gonna be Alabama and Clemson again. Would this be the 4th or the 5th time they've met up again in the postseason?
I believe this will be the 4th championship game, 5th time in the postseason.
Yeah, because they seem to meet up quite often, and outside of last year, each meetup for them has been quite entertaining. But I think that Alabama's got some bad blood. For that reason, I think that Alabama's going to take the championship again. But I really just see this season as a 2-team race with Clemson, Alabama, and then the field.
Yeah.
I think that's the way that a lot of people look at it, and so I'm not going to predict anything but that.
My prediction, this may shock you, I'm going to go 1 Clemson, 2 Alabama. Number 3, I actually have Oklahoma. I think Jalen Hurts brings an experience to the quarterback position that Oklahoma's used to now.
Yeah.
That it had with Baker Mayfield
and Kyler.
And then coming in at number 4, I do think it is going to be Ohio State, just because I think that bug that's in Michigan's head, whenever they see Ohio State, they just can't beat them. I think it continues. I'm going with Ohio State to round it out at number 4. Again, I feel like if I don't predict this, I'm depriving college football. So I'm going to go with the rematch, and I'm actually going to go with Clemson again. I think they just have the best pure player in Trevor Lawrence at the most important position.
Not to mention they still have that stellar running back in
not to mention all the other weapons.
Yeah.
But I think the main reason is going to be on Trevor Lawrence's back. But I'm going to have Clemson over Alabama again.
Great predictions, guys.
Yeah.
Just to be different, I'm going to go Clemson number 1. I don't see them losing a game this year, honestly. Number 2, I'm going to switch up. I'm going to go Georgia.
Okay.
Looking at their schedule, they have Vandy, Murray State, Arkansas State, Notre Dame, which it would be a good win, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, Auburn, A&M, Georgia Tech. I think if they might drop one game, but I think they still have the sour taste from last year losing to Bama. So I think they sneak in, or they're number 2. I'm going to put Oklahoma at 3 because they are in the Big 12 and they have Jalen Hurts, like you said. And then 4, I don't want to put Bama, but it's hard not to. So Bama is going 4, I guess. Clemson. And just to be different, I'm going to put Georgia. And I I still think Clemson's Clemson. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, a lot of people think that it's hard. The two teams from one conference is more of a difficult.
Yeah.
But it's definitely unique.
Yeah.
But I think very realistic scenario is that if a one-loss Georgia plays an undefeated Alabama in the SEC championship game, and Georgia wins, making both teams one loss with Georgia SEC champion, I think Georgia at 2 and Bama at 4 is a very realistic possibility. Only if that unique scenario happens.
Yeah, I believe didn't that happen in 2018?
Yes.
And that's when Alabama beat Clemson and then went on to beat
Georgia.
Georgia.
That was when Tua came in at halftime.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's happened before. I definitely think that can happen again.
So, they're the typical teams, Clemson, Bama, and the rest we've mentioned. Do y'all have any dark horse candidates that could possibly make a run this year? Tanner?
I would like to say something different than the one I said before of the team to watch out for, but I didn't have Georgia in my playoff, but I wouldn't consider them a dark horse. Everyone knows that they're top to bottom. They're a great football team. Same thing with LSU and Michigan. So
I don't think they're right now. Just looking at the top 25, I don't think there's a dark horse. Like I wouldn't be surprised if somehow Oregon is in the top 4, but will it happen? Probably not.
Right, and it's hard to call them another team I already mentioned before to be on the lookout for. Keegan actually had them in the playoff. It's Texas. Like I said, really kind of one team standing in their way at the top of the Big 12, and they have confidence now.
Yeah. I gotta go ahead and head out, but as I'm wrapping my stuff up here, I'm gonna give you one team. I don't even think we've said their name today. Michigan State. It's a team that a lot of people are writing off just because they're in such a tough division that always boils down to Ohio State or Michigan at the very end of the season. But the thing is that when you're playing those two teams year in, year out, as well as you also have to face up against Penn State, you have the schedules to rack up the correct wins in order to make it to that point in time. It's just about whether they'll be able to do it or not. Last year, Michigan State had a bit of a down scenario. A down year as opposed to what we're normally seeing with them. But that being said, Mark D'Antonio is a great coach, and he should be able to put out another great bounce back year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in the top 10 just because they love to thrive when they're not being talked about. And we hadn't even mentioned the name once. But as I head out, I'm going to miss the talk about the Heisman stuff as well as some of the other various things going on in college football season, but I'm really looking forward for this season and looking forward to tomorrow night to see the Hawks play. But hopefully we're wrong and we have a bit more parity than just Clemson and Alabama. Gentlemen,
Or talking about a team that could possibly slide in there. I'm looking at Wisconsin. They have a huge question mark at their quarterback.
Yeah,
which is kind of the anti-Iowa. It seems like Wisconsin is better than Iowa because it seems like most likely is going to be what Big Ten West boils down to. It seems like Wisconsin is better than Iowa at every single position, but the most important one, which is the quarterback.
But can you say that not knowing how good the Wisconsin quarterback is?
Right, and apparently they do have a freshman that they like. They're not starting in week 1, but they do like him. They believe this kid could be a stud. But as we mentioned, really Iowa the only team standing in the way in the West. So if they win that game against Iowa, which is at home, which I predicted as a loss, and I think so did you. Then they move into the Big Ten title game. All they got to do is win one game and they're in the playoff, which is a lot easier said than done because it's most likely going to be against Ohio State or Michigan. But anyone can win in any game, and if they come out and play their game and win, I don't think you can leave out a Big Ten champion Wisconsin. So
it'll be.
They don't really have the toughest. They have to win 2 important games at home against Iowa, and then in the Big Ten championship game. But nothing unrealistic.
I'm gonna go crazy. Probably won't happen, but isn't insane prediction. I'm gonna say Iowa State. Now my reasoning they have pulled off many upsets in the past. And the only really two teams they need to beat is Oklahoma and Texas. And I don't think you can put a team that beats both of them not in the playoffs. Do they win? No. I don't believe that'll happen. But just to be, it could happen, probably won't, like I said before, but it would be insane if that happened. But, I mean, they play Iowa, given it is a home game, but those games are always tough. And then I think they play Texas, Oklahoma. So it'll be interesting. Like we've seen in past college football players, Big 12 doesn't perform well because they're all about offense. Don't play a lick of defense. So even if they do make it there, that's why I think any team from Big 12, the only one that has a possible chance of making it to the championship game is Oklahoma, just because Jalen Hurts is just absolutely incredible. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people being in that offense.
Let's pick on that. We love picking on that weak Big 12.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to talk about Heisman?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as the
Okay. Now we're going to switch to some more awards. So we're going to be talking a little bit about preseason award predictions. Obviously, the biggest one, the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, the front runners this year are Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. Everybody knows who he is. And Tua from Bama. Both are very proven they're the front runners, obviously, this year. So who do you have as your potential Heisman Trophy?
I got two. One of them is the obvious. He's already said his name, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Because the nature of the award is it usually goes to the best player at one of the most important positions on a good team.
Yeah.
And Trevor Lawrence is the best player at the most important position on the best team.
Yeah.
So with those three combinations, it's hard to bet against Trevor Lawrence. However, it's not a lot. Another guy I'm looking at to have a monster year is Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. We talked about how this team is good all around, but their question mark is at the quarterback. And when you have a question mark at the quarterback and you have a veteran running back who I think might be the best pure running back in the Big Ten, you've got to lean on him. He's going to get his fair share of touches, to say the least. He's going to be out in space. They're going to run all kinds of different screens, stretches, all types of stuff to get him the ball and get him in space, which is why I think he's going to have a massive year and could carry him to a Heisman.
I think a good comparison, not play style, I believe, but just how the offense works. Christian McCaffrey, that Stanford offense, who Iowa unfortunately knows way too well, they played through Christian McCaffrey, and with this quarterback situation at Wisconsin, like you said, Jonathan Taylor's going to need to bail him out sometime. So I agree. I think Jonathan Taylor will have a tremendous year. Another guy I think is very under the radar. I think too potentially Justin Herbert. He completed 59.6 of his passes for 2,985 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. I think I'm high on this kid. I believe he got injured last year. I could be wrong on that. But Oregon offense, it's fast-paced. They put up points in the Pac-12. So that's obviously, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to win. I think everybody thinks that's who's going to win. But just to be different, I think people kind of are sleeping on Jalen Hurts, actually. He's going to Oklahoma, who has 2 former Heisman, 2 of the last Heismans, with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. Both are in the NFL, as many of you know. I think Jalen Hurts killed it at Bama, I mean, he led them to what? How many championships?
Yeah, he led him to. He won one, and then he led him to a second and played the first half of the second, and then Tua came in and won.
And then he put the team on his back last year.
And that's the championship game against Georgia. He put the team on his back.
I mean, obviously he could play. Tua was just half a step above him. I think I will not be surprised if Jalen Hurts beats out Trevor Lawrence. Because Trevor Lawrence, if any of y'all didn't watch it, he was out the third quarter last game, given they were playing a subpar football team. Who did they play?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Okay, so ACC, but nothing special. So he might not play a lot of fourth quarter games, which
kind of like Tua last year.
Yeah,
right? Tua played a lot of 3/4 games.
Yeah, which is partially why I think Kyler Murray took it last year. But so I think I'm really high on Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts has a better chance of beating out Trevor Lawrence just because he is in the horrible defensive competition of the Big 12, as we mentioned numerous times throughout this show. I just think it's interesting how neither of us mentioned Tua, the quarterback for Bama. I mean, we know he's amazing. He completed 67.7% of his passes last year, 3,353 yards, 37 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. And we're not even putting him in the. I mean, he is in the running, but none of us are like, he's a clear winner.
It almost seemed like after the game last year, it just took all the air out of the Tua number one play. Tua best. It kind of took all the air because Trevor Lawrence just played so well, and Clemson obviously just absolutely rolled over at the time. It's unintended.
I mean, you can't bet against Trevor Lawrence, honestly. Yeah, I mean,
exactly. He's the best player at the most important position on the best team.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't look at their schedule, but I find it very hard that Clemson, given they are in the ACC, which isn't the toughest, it's better. In my personal opinion, I think it is better than ACC because there's always those teams that don't have the record to show for it, but they could be a top 25 team. And Big 12, I mean, let's be honest, it's Oklahoma and Texas. I mean, Kansas State's decent at most. They're a Northwestern of the Big 12. Iowa State obviously could make some runs, but I think it's just going to be an interesting football season for the Heisman. Obviously, like we said numerous times, Trevor Lawrence is the front runner, but we wouldn't be shocked if we saw players such as Jonathan Taylor, Tua, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. I think this is kind of the given, but the Doak Walker Award, if y'all don't know, it is the running back best player or best running back. Just to name off a couple of potential winners: Jonathan Taylor, Kennedy Brooks for Oklahoma, Travis
Etienne.
There you go for Clemson. Eno Benjamin for Arizona State, Keyshawn Vaughn from Vandy, and I just threw some names in here: J.K. Dobbins and Raheem Boyd from Arkansas. J.K. Dobbins, obviously Ohio State. So obviously Jonathan Taylor.
Jonathan Taylor definitely is I think most likely. Although I would like to throw out some stats for another name. Yeah, kind of a tough name to pronounce as we've seen. And that's Travis Etienne.
Yeah.
The running back for Clemson, which should already tell you about how good he is. He's the starting running back for the best team in college football. Everyone loves to look at that national championship game and immediately start praising Lawrence. Rightfully so. Lawrence obviously played out of his mind. But in the postseason, Travis Etienne averaged just over 8 yards a carry. Against Alabama, he pitched in 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown. Last year, he had games where he averaged, against Louisville, he averaged 19.1 yards a carry. Wake Forest, he averaged 16.7 yards a carry. He had 5 games last year where he averaged double-digit yards per carry.
Wow.
And not to
I didn't
mention
know that.
the start he got off to this year. All he did was put in 12 attempts for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging 17.1 yards a carry.
Yeah.
You can take that with a grain of salt because it is, of course, Georgia Tech, but this man is the real deal.
Yeah.
And defenses are going to be so caught up with stopping Trevor Lawrence, as we've mostly said in this show, is stop Trevor Lawrence. This kid is going to run all over you if you do not prepare correctly. So I think he's a little bit overshadowed just because of how good his team is and how good his quarterback is. But when you look at best running backs, I think someone who's right behind Jonathan Taylor would be Travis Etienne.
Like we said before, Clemson was in all 3 of our top. I mean, how can you bet against this Travis Etienne guy and perhaps the best player in college football in Trevor Lawrence? The quarterback who can throw for 2,000 some yards and the running back who can rush for 1,500 plus yards. I mean, that offense is incredible. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they come back all 4 years and play. It wouldn't shock me. I think just looking at this, man, I've never heard of this guy. It's just doing research. Eno Benjamin for Arizona State in the Pac-12 offensive league. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry with 300 carries, 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns. I think that could potentially be a guy we could see in the running. So yeah, I mean, obviously Jonathan Taylor and this running back from Clemson is the two. I mean, you got anything else on what we should expect from the college football season this year?
I think Keegan had a good thing he said before he had to cut out. It's just hopefully there's more parity than we think, but as of right now, it looks like a pretty clear cut 2-team race between Clemson and Alabama for the championship. I do think it is interesting because we rarely talked about the number 3 team, who is Georgia. We did talk about them a little bit, but I just think it's so funny that they just happen to be in the same conference as Alabama, so they just get tossed aside.
Yeah.
Because if Georgia, does actually come out and beat Alabama, make it to the title game, who knows? Mm-hmm. But I could say pretty high confidence right now that it is going to be a 2-team race, which on one hand it does kind of suck because you like to see parity, you like to see new teams getting in, but then again this will be the 5th matchup in the postseason. Shades of Cavaliers Warriors. You just gotta enjoy it. You just gotta enjoy 2 of the best in this decade in college football, just duking it out year after year.
They have the 2 best offenses, 2 best defense, probably the 2 best special teams, and the 2 best coaches with Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban. You can't argue that they are the 2 best. Which one's better? That's another discussion for another day.
That's for the championship game to decide.
I think I'm on the lookout for this college football season. Is Notre Dame and Texas going to live up to every year? Every year, there's 3 teams that are always like they could win the Natty this year. Notre Dame, Texas, and USC. USC, surprisingly, is not in the top 25 preseason.
If people finally see the USC, see through the USC farce, they're really not that good.
I mean, those 2 teams I'm always on the lookout for because I never think they're going to be that great. I mean, we saw Notre Dame play Bama in the national championship a couple years ago, and they just got obliterated. I think Texas, like Tim said earlier in the show, could be bad. Like, not Vince Young Texas back, but they're on the up with this Sam Ellinger guy. I mean, we've mentioned his stats. He's a dual threat. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Yeah. Anything else?
And I would just one more thing is we talked about the Notre Dame. Obviously they got smacked Alabama that year, and then it was 30-3 this year, which evidently was closer to Clemson than Alabama. Alabama lost 44-16, which is 28. They lost 30-3, which is 27.
Okay.
But like you said, Notre Dame. It's just being independent. You have a history of the independent program. You have the Golden Dome, but it just sometimes it hurts not having the conference championship game, not having the same schedule, the same strong schedule where you can play the best in your conference. So Notre Dame's gonna need to win those big games because they need proof that they are a good team. It might not sound like the most in-depth analysis, but each game against a good team is absolutely massive for Notre Dame because they just need to prove that they can be good.
So, just being curious, I did look up the Notre Dame football schedule. They play Louisville, at Louisville, New Mexico at home. They do play at Georgia, which is obviously, like you said, one of the big time games. Then Virginia at home, then Bowling Green at Notre Dame, then the infamous USC at Notre Dame. Then they go to Ann Arbor against Michigan, and then they play Virginia Tech at Notre Dame, which could be a potential good game. Then at Duke, then Navy at home, then Notre Dame against Boston College at Notre Dame. Then they end the year with Stanford at Stanford. So just listening to that schedule, I think it'll be very tough for them to be a Final Four.
Right, I think only 3 currently ranked top 25 teams.
One of them's 25th.
One of them's 25, and the other 2 are 7 and 3.
Yeah.
So,
the 2 best conferences in college.
And I believe that both against 7 and 3, being Georgia and Michigan, are both on the road too. Mm-hmm. So again, no one's gonna fault them for losing those games.
Yeah.
They're definitely tough games, but then you just don't have those top 25 games where you're not gonna be a conference champion. You don't have wins over top 25. Who knows? Maybe Stanford falls out by the time they play.
And I know you were saying.
I was just gonna finish up. So like we said, we really need to win at least one of those 2 against Michigan.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you kind of brought up the independent and not having that conference championship because we saw in the first couple of years of this college football playoff, they look for the conference championship. The conference that didn't have a championship but now does, Big 12, which is interesting because obviously we've seen it. Conference championships matter, and Notre Dame just doesn't.
Right, and I think in the history of the college football playoff, it's been going on since 2015. This year will end up being 2020, so it's the 5th year.
Yeah.
So 4 years of it, 4 teams make that 16 total teams have made it. And I think if I recall off the top of my head, Notre Dame last year, they had Alabama made it 1 year. They didn't win the SEC.
Yeah.
And is that it?
Probably.
I'm trying to think. Off the top of my head, there are 2, maybe 3. Maybe 3 teams. I don't know off the top of my head, but 2, maybe 3 teams in this year have made it without being.
Yeah. So
your odds are not good.
I think they need to get. Why don't they join the ACC like they do in basketball?
They do kind of play an ACC schedule, but you just might as well join.
Might as well. Yeah, absolutely. Any last words, Tanner?
Not really. I'm just so excited for this year, especially with Iowa. like we said, the one thing this year that we really haven't had in past years is a third-year QB. It seems like we've always had a guy for 2 years, whether that be Beathard, whether that be Stanzi. It just seems like we have 2 years. This year we have a third, and after seemingly taking a step back last year, all Iowa fans are looking for a huge stride in a characteristically weak Big Ten West, as it really always is.
Yeah. Definitely the weaker of the two.
Yes, definitely the weaker of the two. So I'm just super excited. College football is back. Best time of the year.
Absolutely. So opening games start tomorrow. Iowa kicks off at 6:30 at the historic Kinnick Stadium against Miami, Ohio. Hopefully the Hawks should come up with an easy win. So we'll be at that game. We're super excited. And go Hawks, baby. And that'll be all for this episode of the Sports Talkeyes Show. We thank you for tuning in, and be on the lookout for the next episode.